Hey everybody, it's Marcus. Welcome back for the December 2023 monthly update of our Tesla solar panel and Powerwall system. I'm here with what's going to be the last update of the year for 2023. So we're going to take a look at all the numbers for 2023. We can finally compare them to 2022 and see what the yearly stats look like. And as always, we'll go over that December data here too. Keep on watching. Now with 2023 winding down, let's take a look at the numbers for our house usage. In November of 2023, it was 663.9 kilowatt hours up to 896.5 kilowatt hours. Now we have a gas furnace here. Basically, it's not going to contribute that much more to our daily, electricity load. It's about 500 watts to a kilowatt when it's running. Maybe in the coldest of days it runs 15-20 minutes an hour, so it's maybe about a 5 kilowatt or so increase in usage per day. Over the course of the month that might add 100-150 kilowatt hours, so that's part of the increase here. I think mainly this is just car charging here. One thing you'll notice is it was just a low production month. December always is. We're going to use the grid more, so there's just going to be a lot more gray here. That's why you bank all those credits during the summer. This is just when you use them, essentially. You're just producing, not nearly as much, so you're going to need to use the grid here. You also have Christmas lights running, but for the most part, they should be LEDs. Ours all are. You might have family here, might be cooking, doing more, so you might increase your use, a little bit more, but nothing to write home about here. Now looking at the yearly numbers, from December 2021, it was 793.6 kilowatt hours. December 2022, 744.5. You can see at the end of 2022, our numbers basically went flat. We were on vacation at the end of the year. We also had a storm watch mode at the end for an atmospheric river, so that's why it went all gray as I just set that back up to 100%. And then in December of 2023, we were up to 896.5 kilowatt hours. Again, I really think that's just charging. It's about the same in terms of grid usage for the 3 months there, 63%, 50%, and then 56%. So December, like I said, you're just going to use the grid more, completely normal. That's why you bank those credits during the summer so you can use them now. Now let's take a look at the solar. December. It's a depressing month for solar numbers, unfortunately. November was at 703.2 kilowatt hours. That's about 20 or so kilowatt hours per day, a little bit more than that. December was all the way down to 482.8 kilowatt hours, just a hair more than 15 kilowatt hours in production per day. There's a lot of weather, a lot of clouds, a lot of rain. It's the shortest days of the year until you hit December 21st there, so expect to not really produce much in December. That's completely normal. 482.8, while it felt like we were producing nothing this past December here, looking at the history, it actually was a little bit more than we normally do these years. Now in 2021, 468.4, 2022 was 464.9, and then 23, 482.8. So they're all relatively close to each other. You can see whenever there's weather, like at the end of 2022, when we had those atmospheric rivers, there are just going to be days where you're probably going to struggle to make 3, 4, 5 kilowatt hours with your system. So, here's where I tend to run my system in a different backup reserve level, just because you're not going to produce enough to recharge your Powerwalls during the day. So I like to have the backup just in case something happens, especially with the rain and weather around here in December. So typically I run in a 60% backup, 40% daily use range, but you can adjust that kind of looking at your usage. We do tend to use the grid more when we do that backup range like that, but I think it's worth it. Again, you bank all those credits during the summertime so you can use them here. And I think the benefits of having the Powerwall when there's all this weather, is having the protection against outages or anything that might happen. So I think that's worth it for the trade-off with those non-bypassable charges and such. Now, Powerwall numbers for November of 2023 were at 325.8 discharged, 398.2 charged. In December, that was down to 239.9. discharged and 288.3 kilowatt hours charged. This mainly, like I said before, is that 60-40 split that I started doing for the backup reserve. Also, as you can see in the 2023 graph there for December, we just had periods where we had weather events and I didn't want to use the system. I just wanted to rely on the grid where I could for those, credits we have banked. And so there's about a week there where I just had the system in 100% backup mode. We'd run on solar if there was any production during the day, and that would kind of cover the house load with the grid filling it in. Now, not ideal, you pay those non-bypassable charges, but I think that's worth it because I think one of the best benefits, or one of the main reasons people get Powerwalls is for that backup protection. So keeping your Powerwalls at 100% just guarantees that you're not going to have to monkey with power outages at all, basically, unless you have a multi-day storm without solar production. Now, looking at the Powerwall numbers historically in 2021, charged I'm not really going to look at here. Just it's the function of the Powerwall being used and then charge back up again. But discharge numbers: 178.1 for December 2021, 207.2 for 22, and 239.9 for 2023. I think that's a lot of us just kind of getting our feet underneath ourselves, knowing what the system was. When we first had it in December that first year, those numbers for production are really drastically low. So at that point, I think I was probably the heat miser and, didn't want to use electricity as much as possible. So that's why we just kept, as little usage as possible, I'd say, and the discharge numbers were so low. December was, a little bit more than that, but then again cut off at the end of the year because we were 100% backup for the storms rolling through. And then December 2023 here, we're just kind of getting to know our system a lot better, what we can set in terms of those backup levels so we can utilize our electricity behind the meter as much as possible, so it makes sense, and while still keeping that backup reserve that, I'd love to have in case something happens. Net grid use numbers for December you can always expect are going to be your worst for the year in terms of importing from the grid and exporting to the grid. Now looking at November 2023, 241.6 imported, exported 87 or so kilowatt hours for a net grid use of 154.7 imported. In December, that was all the way up to 616.9 kilowatt hours imported. Now, a good chunk of that, about 25% of that, was us charging there at about 140 kilowatt hours. So I think that really makes a difference. But in general, you're just not going to produce much electricity and you're going to use a lot of those banked credits in December. Now, historically, looking at our numbers in 2021, we imported 410 kilowatt hours roughly. In December 2022, 365.7 kilowatt hours. And in 2023, 617 kilowatt hours. This is just a function of knowing that we have a lot of excess credits again. So I'm going to use the grid more in December to my convenience, charging the cars, whatever it is. I just think that, instead of getting paid a nickel by the power company in April, I'd rather use the credits that we've backed up and keep it all behind the meter. So I don't really think that, despite December being that high, that it's anything to worry about. I knew we had quite a bit in excess, and I'll go over those numbers for the year and, why I could do this. But yeah, basically, I wanted to keep everything behind the grid in 2023, so I expected this number to be kind of shocking, but still, we should be producing in excess and still should be getting a check this April. Now, before we get to those yearly numbers, I just want to remind everybody, I think it's totally worth it to go to Tesla.com, click on the energy site, and just fill out your info, fill out your energy usage, your typical bill, have Tesla design a system for you and see how it looks and works for you. Run the numbers a little bit. It's $100, completely refundable up until you accept the design of the system. And I mean, make an investment in yourself and your house in the future instead of paying your electric company these crazy 50 cent per kilowatt hour rates that we do. Make sure if you do it, use my referral link that I'll link down below here. You got to click through it when you place the order, and that'll get you $500 off when you get the system. So make sure you use that link. Let me know if you need any help. If you have any questions about sizing your system or what you think you'll need, leave them in the comments down below. Now let's take a look at that awesome yearly data. Now, I think before we take a look at the 2023 numbers, I want to go over 2022 a little bit here. It just gives a little bit more perspective on what we produced and used for 2022 versus 2023 and kind of how we changed our ways of going about it. Now, if you look at 2022, we used 13.4 megawatt hours or 13,400 kilowatt hours for our home. Max use was May, June, and July, about 1.7 megawatt hours during June and July. That's mainly, as you can see, a lot of AC use during the day. Running off of solar all the time, you're producing 80, 90 kilowatt hours a day during the summer, and so it's not only hot, but we're using the AC a lot. So that's going to be most of your use. Generally from May to August, I would say is probably about 50% of your use for the year. Now compare those numbers to 2023. We used 14.8 megawatt hours in 2023 for the year. That's about a 10% or so increase, 1.4 kilowatt hours more than in 2022. July and August were our main heavy users. It was just a hotter, I believe, hotter summer then, so we used more AC. But I also did things a little bit differently. Once we got our true-up check in 2022, and I saw for 2022, and I saw that, hey, all this excess electricity, about 3,000 kilowatt hours, was only worth about $250. And let's keep it all behind the meter a bit more. So we ended up turning the AC way down. I like it, essentially like an ice box in here during the summer. And with solar, you have all that excess electricity that you're just sending back to the grid, contributing to the duck curve, which doesn't really help those utility companies. So I decided, let's turn the AC down, hey, 68, 70, oof, it was cold here, but I loved it. We also kind of charged our cars at home a bit more. So that's, about a roughly 10 or 15% increase in July and August. It looks like July we used 2 megawatt hours or 2,000 kilowatt hours. August was at 2,100 kilowatt hours. So, roughly 200, 300 kilowatt hours more during the 2023 summer than it was during 2022. Now, I find the solar numbers to be the most interesting here. We have 12.24 kilowatt in panels on our east-facing roof. For 2022, we produced 18.2 megawatt hours, 18,200 kilowatt hours. Just like our house usage, April through July is generally going to be the 50% or so, the biggest chunk that you'll produce during a year. For 2022, in April, it was about 2 megawatt hours produced. May, June, and July were around 2.4 or 2.3 megawatt hours produced. Now, 2023, we produced about 1,100 kilowatt hours less in April through July. Again, that's going to be your highest production numbers, but April was just at about 2 megawatt hours, and the highest month there, I believe, was June at 2.2 megawatt hours. Now, there can be a lot of different factors into why you produce less. There could be different weather, the temperature, going way up. If it was a hotter summer, can cause a decrease in production. So generally, I'm not too concerned. This is about a, 5, 6, 7% decrease. I don't really think that this is anything too, alarming to me, I would say. Basically, I'm going to keep an eye on it for 2024, but I think this is completely normal. There is going to be some degradation in what your system can produce. I don't think this is all degradation. I think this is probably weather for the most part. But yeah, basically in June and July, we produced 2.2 megawatt hours, which that's a ton of electricity. You can run your AC, you can run everything else, charge your EVs, and still have plenty of excess. We were still making about 80 kilowatt hours per day on those peak producing months there. Now looking at Powerwall numbers for 2022, we discharged 5,939.8 kilowatt hours and charged 6,909 kilowatt hours. Discharges mainly, you can see, are just going to go to house usage. There are that little, those gray spots, and that is the virtual power plant that we participate in. I believe it was around 300 kilowatt hours or so in 2022. We got about $585 as a reimbursement check for that. Now in 2023, we discharged a bit less, about 500 kilowatt hours less, at 5,485.2 kilowatt hours, and we charged it a little bit less, also about 600 or so kilowatt hours at 6,364.9. Now you can see the different colors on here. Basically, the red is your vehicle charging, which they started incorporating later into last year, so that's why that's not on 2022. You can also see the gray on the discharge there. That's basically going to be your virtual power plants again. And you can also see a little bit of gray there in the yellow, which is the charging. And that's showing that we had some storm watch modes. Basically those, severe weather events where the system will use the grid to charge when normally we just use solar. We're on the old tax credit plan where we're not allowed to use the grid to charge unless there's an emergency. So for us, it's kind of few and far between when we're using the grid to charge. So you just see that, in August there, it looks like we just had a couple storm watch events that caused us to charge from the grid. Now, in terms of discharging less from 2022 to 2023, about 500 kilowatt hours or so. That's a function of the virtual power plants being used less for a couple hundred kilowatt hours. And it's also the storm watch mode. As I kind of learned our system from 2022 to 2023, I could kind of anticipate when we were going to have weather events that might lose power. So I would go ahead and just preemptively set the system to 100% backup instead of waiting for the storm watch mode to happen. I tried to do that so that we would use our solar, as wisely as possible, and just keeping it behind the grid there and just charging our batteries instead of using the grid and paying those non-bypassable charges, which I don't like. So mainly once you've got that system set to 100%, it's just sitting there not really discharging. So that pretty much explains that disparity in the different levels there. Now here's the grid use numbers, and these are the ones that are going to determine your true-up check or what your yearly bill is, basically. Looking at this yearly numbers here. Now, the confusing part is for us, we have PG&E as our energy supplier. We have Valley Clean Energy, I think, is our energy distributor. And basically, they don't run their true-up at the same time. PG&E does October to October, and Valley Clean Energy does, I think, March to March. So the numbers that you see in the app here only go January to December, which I wish Tesla would allow us to create a kind of custom year here so it would more accurately line up with your true up. Otherwise, you kind of have to extrapolate stuff, take some months out, add in ones from the next year, but it is what it is. Now in 2022, we had just gotten our system in September 2021. Before that, we were a bit more cautious with the system because we just didn't know where we were going to end up, after the year had ended. Essentially, we imported 1,347.3 kilowatt hours. We exported 5,206.1 kilowatt hours. That's net grid use of 3,858.8 kilowatt hours exported to the grid. So we were net exporters for 2022. Now you can see in the graph there that the only different color you're going to see during the export, that green, is from the virtual power plant events and the Powerwalls. Other than that, that's just all solar excess during the day for just about every month except for December, our lowest producing month. Now 2023 kind of had a different handle on the system, like I said, and we knew that with 3,800 in excess, we only got a true-up check for about $250. So had we bought that from the power company, it's probably closer to $2,000 because our rates are about 50 cents per kilowatt hour now. They're ridiculously high. But when you're a net exporter, they only pay you about a nickel per kilowatt hour that you produce in excess. So we tried to run everything as much as we could kind of behind the meter here and just keep our power to ourselves and not send as much back in 2023. Now, Knowing we also produced an excess, we utilized the grid as a bit more of a battery. I kind of changed my tune about the non-bypassable charges and wanted to use the grid when it was convenient. So I used it for car charging and, you know, just generally if I needed to use a lot of electricity and I didn't want to use the Powerwalls for whatever reason, whether it was weather or, you know, we had something else going on, basically I'd use the grid. So our import numbers for 2023, 3,173.0 kilowatt hours imported. Exported was 4,382.3 kilowatt hours. We had net grid use of 1,209.3 kilowatt hours exported. Now this graph again is going to look a little bit different than 2022. They added the vehicle data, so that's that red at the end of the year there. That wasn't available before that. So that's showing that we use the grid to charge our cars there. I tended to do that a bit more in 2023, so you know I'm not surprised that some of those bars are that big. The green was in the import side is from storm watch events. So if, you know, for us it usually is like a fire risk, high wind warning. We would charge mostly from the grid in those. Sometimes, you know, if I saw it kind of coming ahead of time, I would set the system to 100%, so we just use our solar anyways instead of using the grid. And then in those export numbers, that green is the virtual power plant events. Again, 2023, we didn't really export as much in those virtual power plant events as we did in 2022. Still was pretty lucrative to us. I'll go over those details in a little bit. But 1,209.3 kilowatt hours exported net for the year. I'm expecting we'll probably see a check at our true up that's, I don't know, between $50 and $100. It's one of those things where you really don't want to size your system based on that true up check at the end of the year, because it's not going to be worth it, especially in NEM 3.0 where, you know, basically they're not going to reimburse you as much as they would in 2.0. It's just you want to size your system for your use and your future use, not for what you're going to export. You don't want to size your system or oversize it based on wanting to be a net exporter just for the sake of that. You want your system to be sized based on your use and where you think it's going to go, and trying to get that number as close as you can to, you know, even essentially, because that's the most efficient way to do it. I hope you enjoyed the December and 2023 year in review. Again, solar can be confusing, so if you have any questions, you're curious about, you know, maybe sizing your system or what you should expect, leave me a comment, send me a message, let me know how I can help. My end game here is that I want to see everybody who's thinking about solar or, you know, maybe wondering if it works for them, I want to see them get set up with a system that saves them the most money and makes the most sense. So if there's anything I can do to help you, please let me know. We'll see you next time.